All right, and now that all of our pieces have been sanded up to 220 grit, we're about ready to do assembly on the leg assemblies, and then after that, the tray as a whole. There's just a few things that we need to check before assembly to make sure if we need to change the size of anything, that we should do this now before we start trying to glue up, and I'm gonna give you those tips now. All right, and my first tip for assembly is I have the tray here clamped up. Obviously you can tell that there's no plywood in it currently. I have the dowel inserted in the leg assemblies, so those are finished right now. And I have the dowel also inserted in the holes in the side pieces. So everything's installed properly. When I clamp this together, I'm having an issue where this won't tighten up. This gap here will not tighten up with the end pieces and the side pieces. And the reason for this is because the dowel right now is a little bit too long and it's preventing it from closing up. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to push them all the way forward on both sides, and I'm gonna measure the gaps here, and then I'm gonna remove that much material off the dowel. And the way I'm gonna do that is that I'm just gonna use the edge sander. It shouldn't take very long to take that much material off, but I'm gonna measure that, write down that number, then make sure I put that measurement onto the dowel, just sand off a little bit, reassemble this and check it up. The main thing we're looking for is that these gaps can be fully tightened with the clamp and that our dowel still fits in the hole snugly. There's a chance you're going to have to take a little bit of material off of your leg crossbars if we have to shorten the dowel quite a bit for this joint to be square and 90 degrees. And to do that, all you're gonna do is take a little bit of material off the shoulder of the leg crossbar on one side, and that will allow it to close up a bit. We can check that when we go to do the glue up for the leg assemblies. So right now, all I'm gonna do is shorten my dowel up, and then I'll reassemble it like this and show you how it goes. All right, I've shortened the dowels, and as you can see, I have taken the leg crossbars out of their spots, and it seems like everything is fitting up perfectly. As you can also see, there is one clamp going across this way. That's because I was measuring it and it wasn't quite square. So I just did that with a tri-square here, brought it to the corners. You can do this on the inside or the outside, but you need to make sure that it's square. So now it's square, everything is fitting up much more snugly. There is tension on these as the clamps are applied. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a measurement from the inside, from the side piece to the other side piece. And I'm going to now have to shorten up my leg crossbars a bit. So I'm going to do this two ways. One, I'm going to take off the inside of the shoulder a little bit. You can do this the same as you did it before with a chisel. And then two is I'm going to have to shorten the end a bit to bring everything a bit closer. So do it on the end of each leg crossbar. There's no reason doing it on both ends. That's just gonna make you twice as much work. So again, I'm going to measure from the inside of this side piece to the inside of this side piece. And then I'm going to remove the material required from the leg crossbar on the inside as well as on the outside. So on the inside of the shoulder and on the outside to make everything smaller so that they will now fit this gap. So using these clamps is what's called a dry fit to make sure everything's clamped up properly, because if we ran into this problem when we had glue on it, it would be a much bigger problem. So we're just doing a dry fit right now, and these are a bit of common things that you might run into. And here we are back again with another dry fit. So as you can see, the leg crossbars are installed. I've shortened them both. I had to shorten them about 4 millimeters each. And so to shorten them, what I had to do, if I can get this out, here we are. I had to shorten both the long end as well as the shoulder. And you can do this again as we did similarly with a hammer and a chisel. Or if it's just a tiny bit, what you can do is you can actually go and just touch it to the disc sander. And I'll show you how I did that. Walk you over. So because this is a hard surface, you want to keep it nice and 90 degrees, but you can bring it right here and just touch it to the inside. You need to be very careful because this removes material very quickly. So you might need to just touch it here and then clean it up and square it off with the chisel. Do a paring cut with the chisel. But that's something that worked well for me. So I wanted to give you that tip, and we're back here at the serving tray. And as you can see, it's a nice tight fit in here. There we go. So the next step for dry fitting is making sure that the plywood tray actually fits as well. So that'll be the next step. And here we go. We have the last dry fit assembled. We've got the plywood tray base installed, and everything fits perfectly. There's no gaps in these joints here. And everything is still nice and square. So if for some reason you do have gaps and your plywood seems to be a bit too big, just double check that it's the same width as your end piece, so that this distance is the exact same as the end piece. And for length, that if we measure from the inside of the rabbet to the inside of the rabbet, and then you add 3/8 on either side for the depth of the groove, that should be the length of the plywood. So those are our two measurements that we need for the plywood. If you need things to be adjusted a little bit, or if there's a gap here, then you need to trim a tiny bit off the length of your plywood. If there is a gap here, that means it's going to be a little bit too wide, and you can adjust that as well. So before we glue everything up, we need to make sure we sand this plywood. It hasn't been sanded yet, and we can sand that down to 220 grit with a palm sander. As well, we have one more step for assembly before final assembly, and that's going to be glue up the leg assemblies on their own. And I'll show that in another video.